Welcome to The Clappers. This is Andrew Young.
And I'm Carl Quinn. Sadly, Hengist is not with us today, but
Andrew Young is back. And listen, after the last episode, which you will all have listened to and downloaded, rated and reviewed, Svein Forkbeard wouldn't leave me alone. Harold Hardrada's hassling me about Stamford Bridge. And man, it's like 1,000 years ago. Get over it. Poor Edith Swanneck is still picking up Harold's parts on the battlefield. And honestly, at my age, 2-3 days in an open boat in the North Sea, I mean, I'm limber, right? And I can cleave the skull of an unarmed monk with the best of them. But really, the time's come to move on. So I'm afraid Hengist is hanging up his hammer. Anyway,
you're beyond again. You're beyond again.
I'm beyond again. On The Clappers, what are we going to talk about today, Carl?
Wake in Fright, the film, the book, the miniseries.
That's my kind of talk.
New to the Yabba?
Yes.
Staying long?
Yeah, just tonight.
Oh, that's hard luck. Want to see a bit more of the Yabba than that.
Have you ever seen Wake in Fright?
I saw the film, which terrified me so much I can never watch it again. I remember I would pass the book on the shelf in the shop, the Kenneth Cook novel, and it would just revive memories. It was such a terrifying, really good film. Excellent film, but I'm too weak. I'm too terrified. Could never see it.
It's an amazing story, Wake in Fright. Both the story itself and the story of what happened with the film. The book was written in 1961, or came out in 1961. Kenneth Cook had been a journalist, had spent some time in Broken Hill working as a journalist, wrote this book. I think he was in his early 30s when it was published, very much drawing, I would guess, on his own experiences, heightened perhaps and fictionalized. You'd have to hope, wouldn't you? You'd really have to hope.
Oh, you would.
Because there are some really terrible things that happen to the central character.
Yeah.
And you don't really want to think that actually happened to anybody in real life necessarily. No. So the film, directed by Ted Kotcheff, a Canadian, written by an Englishman born in Jamaica, starring an Englishman, or two Englishmen really, Gary Bond and Donald Pleasance, who was absolutely memorable in a supporting role, but an amazingly important one. First screen appearance of Jack Thompson. It was...
Don't forget Chips Rafferty.
Chips Rafferty in his last screen appearance. He died shortly after filming, and I think before the film was even released. The film debuted at Cannes in 1971. It got some pretty big raps, including apparently Martin Scorsese was in the audience and was just blown away by it. So this is well before he'd made Mean Streets at that point in time. So arguably had some sort of influence on him. And then it kind of died. It did nothing at the box office and it disappeared for years. And it was many, many years later that a print was found in Pittsburgh and gradually over time restored. And then I think it was in 2009 is my vague recollection. The National Film and Sound Archive re-released a pristine print of it, and then it got commercial distribution. And so people started to see it again from probably 2009. I suspect it did way more damage at the box office, still not a lot, in that second iteration than it did first time round. It's been assessed by so many people as the best Australian film ever made, even though its Australianness is somewhat in doubt. Yes.
Can I tell you the thing that terrifies me most about that film, without spoiling it for anybody? I think it's about a teacher who is taking the train home, as it were, to Sydney. Now, in the 1960s, to get teachers to go and work...
We should say home from his tiny little one-room outback school to Boonda.
I was going to say, in the 60s, you could go to teachers' college and not pay, because everybody had to pay for uni in college, and not pay if you took a secondment of a year, 2-3 years in the country. This urbane man who is clearly not in the right place. The harsh Australian desert is not the place for this effete gentleman. He can't wait to get out of there, and he's going back to his girl. It's got like 6 weeks off, 6 weeks break. He never gets there. And I have had dreams all my life since I was a child that we would be going on holidays. The night before we went on holidays, I'd dream, and we would keep having some postponement. We would never we'd have to stop here, we'd have to pick this up, and we would never get there. And it's just been this lurking fear in the back of my head. And this man is so close, and he never gets there. And that, despite there being some really brutal, terrifying scenes in the film, that's that existential panic of, I'm not going to make it, and it's horrible.
So that anxiety predates seeing the film.
I already had it from when I was 6.
So you were pretty ripe ground, really.
I was there to be taken by this film, and it took me.
Yeah. So the amazing thing about this film, it is a great story. He gets stuck, and John Grant is the teacher's name. Mm-hmm. He gets befriended on his. He takes a
befriended,
accosted, overwhelmed. Well, he meets, and let's just say he meets. Okay, let's go for a more neutral term.
Let's do that.
He meets a bloke, Tim Hines, in a pub who gets him riotously drunk. Mm-hmm. He then blows all his money in a 2-up game. He then tries desperately to get out of this town and get to Sydney to see this girl who is kind of a fantasy figure in the book, and doesn't really. I don't know that he even knows her. She exists, but I don't know that. Well, he knows her, but I don't think he knows her in a biblical sense.
I think she's his fiancée, but yeah, it's dubious.
Yeah, and over a period of days, he gets more and more enmeshed in this town and in the fug of alcohol and
the corruption,
the
stink of vice. That you can smell this film. I tell you one thing about this film: you can smell it. You can smell every single odor coming from the screen. So it's a vivid film, that's for sure.
Sweat, puke, blood,
fecal material.
So one of the most infamous scenes in the film is a roo shoot where Grant gets dragged out into the outback to kill a bunch of kangaroos, with the character Doc Tyden, played by Donald Pleasance, and Jack Thompson, and there's another guy, I can't remember who the other one is now. And anyway, they go out and it's like overnight. They do a lot of shooting. There's blood everywhere. There's drunkenness. There's slitting animals up the guts and so on.
I think most of the listeners will be familiar with how a roo shoot is conducted, Karl.
I wouldn't be. I wouldn't be.
No,
I've never done
joking.
one.
No, nor have I.
But it is a truly overwhelming kind of bit of film, really, and really difficult to watch. It's kind of a horror film without really doing most of the things that you expect of a horror film. It's all kind of at the level of suggestion and potential, and it is a really incredible piece of work.
Perfectibility, progress, a vanity spawned by fear. A vanity spawned by fear.
So the question is, why remake it? Which is what they've done now for TV.
I agree for so many things with what you just said. Why remake it? There are a lot of films that they remake, and you wonder, why did you do that? I won't list them. You know the ones I'm talking about. I'm not going to list them. But yes, why?
Well, I think the main reason is that so few people saw it. As much as Wake and Fright is revered, it is almost unseen, certainly by the majority of Australians.
Can you see it? If I wanted to see it tonight, which I never will, what would I do?
You would probably have to get it on DVD.
From where?
Well, I'll come back. I'm going to come back here from your mate's house.
I'll go to the video shop that I used to go to that closed down.
That's right. You can walk down the street to that artisanal baker and go,
yeah, exactly.
You used to have DVDs. Do you still? Do you still? Okay. Look, I mean, it is no longer as easy to see it as it was because it's simply not that easy to get DVDs anymore. However, you can get the movie on Stan.
Oh,
you can
really?
See it on Stan. Yes, you can.
Oh,
you can
another
buy
reason
it on a couple of. You can get it on Dendy Direct. There you go. That's a streaming service as well.
Maybe Acme, Acme, the Australian Centre for the Moving Image in that shanty town they call Federation Square in the city of Melbourne, Victoria. They have a shop of all types of motion picture artifacts, and they might sell DVDs.
I reckon you've got a pretty good chance of finding it there. Yes.
If you're going to get it, and people, if you are interested in this film, owning your own copy of it, it might just give you nightmares. I don't know. Maybe you want to buy it for somebody that you care about or don't care about. Yeah, check out at Acme, I reckon.
Anyway, to go back to the point that most Australians have not seen it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If you remake it for TV, then your chances of reaching a lot of Australians are infinitely greater. Yes, it's I agree. It's going on 10, and 10 at the moment is struggling for audiences and has been for several years. But you'd imagine this is going out on Sunday night, October 8 and October 15, going out at 8:30 p.m. Okay. And I've got to say, I applaud the idea of doing effectively a Sunday night movie.
I know. I remember them.
They were great, weren't they? Weren't they great?
I used to circle them in the TV program when I was a kid and change the rating with my pencil to G. I remember being in 6th grade. And
were your parents ever conned by that?
They were. Knights of the Round Table, starring Robert Taylor, was on, and all afternoon I was working on my penmanship, and I showed them the program because it was like NRC or whatever it was, and they let me stay up and watch all of it.
So imagine the modern day version of grade 6 Andrew Young.
And I was in kindergarten.
Oh, in kindergarten. Yeah. 6-year-old Andrew Young. Scrubbing out Wake and Fright and turning it into a G. How long do you reckon it's going to take Mr. and Mrs. Young to realise they've been conned?
I reckon if it's shot for shot, that first schoolyard, the train station, all good. Gets to Kalgoorlie. Is it Kalgoorlie in the film?
No. It's called
Broken Hill.
It's called Bundinyabba.
Was it shot
Bundinyabba, but it was shot in Broken Hill.
It was shot in Broken Hill. Anyway, gets there. I think they'd work out pretty quickly. Click.
Yep. So, remade 2-part miniseries directed by Creve Stenders. And Creve is, here's a declaration here, Creve is somebody I went to uni with in Brisbane many, many moons ago.
You never said that before.
Back in the 1820s, I think it was. He's kicked on to have a life, unlike some of us, and he has directed most famously Red Dog. He's got 2 films that are in the cinemas at the moment, Australia Day and the Go-Betweens documentary right here.
Yes, which we talked about a few podcasts ago.
Yes, and he's a prolific and very talented filmmaker, and this is a pretty, I've got to say, it's a gutsy effort to step up and say, I'm manning up, I'm going to have a go at retelling what many people consider to be the finest Australian film ever made. And
the verdict is?
I think he's done a really good job.
Okay.
A really good job.
Castings?
The castings are pretty good. Shawn Keenan is a young Australian actor. I think he probably gave his finest performance, or at least that I've seen, in Puberty Blues when he played the junkie boyfriend.
That was the series.
Of the TV series,
on Channel 10?
Yeah, it was on 10. Yeah.
Good on you, 10.
10 has backed some decent Australian drama. It's got a lot of people that people are going to go, I know him, I know her. Yeah. David Wenham plays the Chips Rafferty role. Now, you may or may not be in the, I don't know, you're in the pro or con David Wenham camp.
No. I think David Wenham is very useful for the kind of projects that you might have Justine Clark involved in, or maybe Noni Hazelhurst. I think he's a very useful man to have around. And I'm not going to say anything against his castings. He's
like a number 7 in the batting order. He's a pretty handy bowler. He's good in the field. He can bat a bit.
If you can picture Chips Rafferty, who, if you can, then picture David Wenham. And I can't. He has such a powerful physical presence in anything that he's in. Yeah. I've seen him in a few films.
Yeah, he was a towering man.
So I'm imagining David Wenham is a great actor. I'm joking.
I'm going to say that I think Wenham is actually terrific in this.
Great,
because he manages to have that sort of Diver Dan from Sea Change kind of laconic charm. So he's got that kind of, hey, you going, John Grant? Can I buy you a drink kind of thing?
Yep.
And that what we were talking about before, that sense of what are his motivations, what's actually going on below the surface. And I think he manages to convey a sense of menace that is really palpable by doing very little. Well, and that's the mark of good acting, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the less you do.
Yeah. Gary Sweet. Isn't it? Now, Gary Sweet is a man who really does divide. I can see which way you're falling.
I'm falling off my chair.
He brings an air of absolute desperation to the character of Tim Hines, and I think it's really good. Look, overall, I think it's a really good effort, but there are 2 scenes in it that have changed massively from the film, and in talking about this miniseries, Creve Stenders, the director, has been at great pains to say it's not a remake of the film. We're going back to the source. We're going back to the book. So in watching the miniseries, I also read the book.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of key scenes. These changes, they're in the book and they're in the film. And they're not in the series. And there's a few additions in the series, and there's a few restorations of things that weren't in the film in the series as well that were in the book. So it's you're kind of getting a mixed bag of changes, and the two things that have changed that I think are really going to get people upset.
People who've seen the film,
are the two things that we were talking about just before: the ruse shoot sequence. There are no ruse shot in this. They're pigs. There is a hunt, and it's feral pigs.
Okay.
So that, while you can say it's sort of like for like, it's actually fundamentally different in what they represent.
Yeah.
So there's a very interesting shift there.
Yeah.
And I understand absolutely why.
It's going on Channel 10.
Well, presumably they're also looking to sell it offshore as well. And the culling of ruse is something that the rest of the world does not understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the second one is involving the scene with Doc Tyden and our man John Grant that we alluded to earlier. We'll say not too much about. And I kind of think I can also understand why that has gone.
Yeah.
Shifting mores and a whole different... What that scene represents is fundamentally different, I think, in now than it was in 1971 or in 1961. So
yeah, I would agree with that, and I don't think I have absolutely no problem with somebody doing that. If you're going to remake a film, remake the film, but do what you like. You know, it's just like when an author finishes a book and then they sell the screen rights. Well, that's done. They've done their work, and so whatever happens to the screen version has nothing to do with that writer. And so I think that's fine. I have no moral objection. I prefer, as I said before, I don't really go for remakes. However, I really enjoyed the Coen Brothers' True Grit.
Yeah,
that the film with John Wayne that I watched as a child is just a silly bit of nonsense, really.
I haven't rewatched it.
I haven't seen the John Wayne film since I was a child.
Yeah.
They made another one after it too called Rooster Cogburn. They obviously the first was successful, and I enjoyed it. But I think the Coen Brothers film is just magnificent.
I
have my very own DVD copy of that film. I have DVDs that I've bought from shops. Right, I have them. And I have Blu-ray discs that I've bought from shops.
Do people come around your house, knock on the door saying, Andrew, can I borrow that, what do you call that round thing?
They do. And do you know what my answer is?
No.
Neither a book, nor a record, nor a tie. Okay, now I did lend a bass player a tie one night. I was at a gig and he'd forgotten his tie, and he sent an emissary down to the audience to me asking if he could borrow my tie. And I knew this man. And I said, of course you can. Don't knot it too tightly. And he wears it really loose anyway. And I got the tie back straight away after it was finished. So, but yeah, generally I'm not lending you any stuff. Nothing. Just don't even ask, all right? I'll lend you money if you have a good track record of paying it back, but nothing else. Don't ask.
If you had a copy of Wake and Fright, would you lend it to somebody?
No.
No way.
No. Look, if you want to come over to my house and watch it, and I'll be doing some practice or doing stuff, that's fine, or I might watch it too. Completely fine, all right? But no, you're not borrowing it.
So,
yeah,
I'm just going to say, mark your diary. October 8.
October 8.
I reckon. Well, I'd like to hear your thoughts after it's aired. See what you make of it.
I don't think it will be anywhere near as terrifying as the film, so I think I may be able to watch it. I may. And I'm not going to ask you this. I was going to ask you a question about...
Well, I'll say one thing about the terror aspect of it.
Do.
The fact that it's got ad breaks means it fundamentally cannot be as terrifying as the film. You're not in the same deep immersive experience for 120 minutes or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So something gets lost in that. There's no question.
In honour of our podcast, The Clappers, I will watch both of those. It means I have to commit to being home
2 Sunday nights in a row.
This coming Sunday?
October 8th and October 15th.
I think I'm free. So, yes.
Okay.
You have my commitment, Carl Quinn.
New to the Yabba?
New to the Yabba.
Like your place?
No, I think it's bloody awful.
You don't like the Yabba?
No.
If you like The Clappers, rate or review us on Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe. There's more goodness coming.